This meeting of the Anderson Township Board of Zoning Appeals is hereby called to order. This board was established pursuant to Section 519.13 of the Ohio Revised Code by the Anderson Township trustees to provide administrative relief to any person or entity adversely affected by the Anderson Township zoning resolution. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Rick Overton.
Present.
Brian Ellis.
Here.
Fred Hayes.
Here.
Steve Haber.
Here.
Brian Johnson.
Present.
Thanks for coming to this meeting. Please be aware that this meeting is audio and videotaped and may be carried live on local cable television. First, I'll outline our procedures. A summary of the appeal is presented by the staff, and then the appellant will present its case. Board members may then ask questions of the appellant. After that time, all persons supporting the appeal will be permitted to testify one at a time after being recognized by the chair. When those persons supporting the appeal are finished, those opposed to the appeal will then be permitted to testify or ask questions of the board. All persons wishing to testify, whether before or against the appeal, may do so only after being sworn in. When testifying, each person must come to microphone. Either one's on today, I think. State your name, address, and affiliation to the case. We limit testimony to 4 minutes unless a board member requests additional time. Please testify to the board and address your comments to the board. The board will hear only new, non-repetitive evidence or questions. Should someone wish to show support of previous testimony, you may do so by just stating that you support the prior person who spoke. Now, will all persons wishing to give testimony this evening please stand, raise your right hand. When in doubt, you can do it, doesn't hurt. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Any changes to tonight's agenda? Okay, I think the first thing on our agenda is approval of minutes from January 2013. Any changes to the minutes?
No. I'll move to approve the January 3rd, 2013 minutes.
Second.
A motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Thank you. February 7th minutes. I have one question, which is whether we should note that that Jeannie Bechtold, the alternate, was present when the meeting was called to order. Along with Allison and Gary.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
Move we accept as amended.
Motion and a second on that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, consideration of case number 2-2013. Imbus Builders on behalf of Don Miller, property owner at 1339 Collinsdale Avenue. Would the staff like to present the case for us, please?
Sure. This residence is located in our C residence district, and the zoning variance request is to allow an 800 square foot accessory structure as a garage use where a maximum of 450 square feet is permitted per section 171.7 of our zoning resolution. Here we can see a general location map as well as the surrounding zoning, primarily also C residential. In the distance there is some E general retail use. The tract is approximately 0.2 acres and has 50 feet of frontage on Collinsdale Avenue. It does have a gradual slope towards the rear of the property, but nothing substantial. And the existing use is single-family residence. So the applicant is proposing to demolish the existing accessory structure, which is approximately 400 square feet, and replace it with another structure to be 800 square feet in size, with architecture matching the existing home. The setback of this structure would be 4.95 feet from the rear property line and 3 feet from the side property line. The home was constructed in 1939 and has the existing freestanding garage, estimated to be about that same time. Here we can see an aerial photo of surrounding uses, as well as the proposed site plan and an elevation drawing. Here's some photos of surrounding conditions, both of the home as well as adjacent residences. So staff is of the opinion that the property in question will yield a reasonable return without the variance. that the existing garage is a reasonable size to house 2 vehicles, that the variance is substantial as the applicant is requesting an accessory structure almost 2 times the size permitted. The essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered and adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment, and the property was purchased with knowledge of the zoning restrictions.
Does anybody have any questions for staff at this time?
The only question I have is there a height on it? Just curious. I didn't see
No,
the-
it would require to be 15 feet or less at the midpoint of the roof line.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? If not, would the applicant or the applicant's representative like to present the case to us? If you please state your name and address.
My name is Amy Imbus. I live at 1010 Spindletop in Pierce Township. Today, we ask that the board grant Don Miller a variance to build 800-square-foot garage to take place of his existing garage of 400 square feet. Because there are currently no less than 3 properties in the neighborhood with structures that are very similar in size, the requested variance is not substantial, will not alter the character of the neighborhood, and will not harm the adjoining properties. The following properties in the neighborhood have substantially similar structures. One at 1368 Collinsdale, which is directly across the street from the adjacent property, which is 800 square feet structure. Number 2 is 1533 Collinsdale with a 750 square foot structure, and 1500 Collinsdale at 750 square feet. Further, if this board grants Mr. Miller the variance, it will not affect delivery of government services in any way. At this present moment, the existing garage, which is deteriorating and which would need to be rebuilt, is too small to house his 4 vehicles. 2 vehicles have to be either parked on the street or out in the driveway. This seems to be far more obtrusive than having the new garage built. The way the new structure is placed on the existing lot, it will be less visible from the front than the existing garage and far more appealing. Mr. Miller needs this variance to yield a return on his property for the following reasons. The new structure will be a significant improvement to the property and add a substantial value to his home and the surrounding area. Mr. Miller's predicament could not be feasibly alleviated through any other method than a variance outside of selling his home and moving to another location. This hardship is not unique to the street, and other property owners have the same situation. This evidence was presented above. In many use, variances are sought in a particular area on the basis of unique or peculiar circumstances. It may be a sign that the entire neighborhood needs to be rezoned rather than forcing property owners to seek variances in a piecemeal fashion. Thank you for your time. We ask that the board grant the variance as requested.
Thank you. Questions?
On the 3 properties you cited with the similar size, how did you find those, or did you just go measure them, or
I
what was your
actually
technique?
drove the street, went down the street, and got the different sizes, and came to the zoning department and actually worked with Allison.
Thank you.
When I similarly drove the street and looked at the similar properties, they were all single-car garages and with attached extensions to the single-car garage, and they looked fairly old, may have been prior to zoning regulations going in Anderson Township. So I didn't see the same thing that you saw. What's the intent of the use of the garage, though?
The intent of the use of the garage is the owner, which actually his wife is here, is Jennifer, and he actually had to be out of town, is he has 4 vehicles. He actually collects vehicles, and it's really to protect his investment and to also get them off the street instead of having them parked in the driveway. Contrary to, I just wanted to go back to what this first gentleman said, is the one structure definitely is a newer structure. It definitely has been built within the past 10 years, so it was before the zoning changed. And that was this 1368 Collinsdale. And that is a 2-car entrance.
Was the construction of that permitted via a variance, a granted variance here from this body?
That I do not know. I don't know. I didn't dig into that.
That one was not, no. There are several in the area that were built prior to the township having its own zoning, as well as one fairly large garage that is attached to the home as well.
That is attached to the home?
Which I don't think I
Okay.
cited any that were attached. The three I cited were
Right, those
were detached.
Yeah.
So what we're saying then is those comply,
Those are existing non-conforming.
existing non-complying? Thank you.
The older structures, but the newer structure is in compliance because it is attached.
Yes.
The newer structure is not,
There's
1368
one
is
that
new.
1368 is new.
It's new and it's not attached.
So how do they have a variance? or
No,
do
they do not.
they- Okay.
I think that was the largest of the two, of the three.
That was the 800 square foot one.
Can you show that, I'm addressing Allison, could you show that aerial
Sure.
photo? Do we see the one she's, yeah,
It's
that's pretty.
1368.
Yeah, but this is
1360.
a 2011 aerial photo that isn't quite the entire property.
If it's there, you're kind of hidden by trees, you probably can't see it.
On the edge of the photograph, too.
And what were the other numbers?
1,500 and 1,533.
1500 and 1533.
Okay,
Up the
so that's
street.
up the street a ways, yeah.
I saw the one.
Do you know what the square footage of the garage is adjacent to the property? Like 1335 and,
No, I do not.
I don't know.
They're all roughly 200.
Yeah.
One question for you. I think in your statement you made a comment that the new garage would be less visible.
Because it's actually sitting, the new garage is actually going to sit further back on the property from where the existing is, if you can see that. The dotted line is where the existing garage is, and we're going to be setting it back.
So it's back about a couple feet?
Mhm.
I see. Thank you.
What's the square footage of the house? Do you know off the top of your head?
I do have that. I think I do. You know, I do not have that with me. I want to say it's 1,900 square feet.
That's okay, thank you.
I think the width, I looked at the county auditor's website today, the width was 28 feet and the depth was 40 feet, so almost pretty close to what the proposed garage is going to be. Just a little bit larger.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this person? One other question for you. You said for 4 vehicles, it's not, is the use intended just for parking, or is it going to be a maintenance garage, and are the vehicles?
It's just for parking. It's just for parking. It looks like the existing structure, the structure we're going to be building is about 20 feet wide, and the existing structure probably is about 80. If the survey that I have is correct, I have the survey here. If it's coming out correctly, it's about double the size of what the width of the garage is going to be.
What kind of vehicles are we talking about here? Do you know?
I would actually have, his wife would probably have to tell you what they are.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
that sounds good.
Any other questions of Ms. Imbus? If not, thank you very much. Would anybody else like to speak in support? I'll recognize the, all right.
My name's Ron Crossman. I live at 1346 Rambling Hills. I have no problem with the structure. My problem was drainage, because Rambling Hills is down below Collingsdale. And some years back, we had a problem. Somebody did some structures down further, and it created a real problem for one of my neighbors until they finally got it corrected. Now, looking at your site, Fortunately, I'm not right behind them, I'm down a couple. So, but I had no problem with the size of the structure, so long as they put the proper drainage in, so that it doesn't affect the people behind them on that downhill section. That's all I had.
Thanks. Any questions?
A quick question, sorry. I did look at those properties when I examined the property in question. It looked to me like all of those properties were fairly down below, not just from a drainage standpoint, but from a site standpoint, a visual standpoint, that the structure would be up above those properties and be pretty much out of view with a light vegetation line. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
For example, I can go up the back of my lot and look right over to the people across the street. That's, that's how much of a hill that is. And as I said, down the road, it was about 8 or 10 years ago, I guess, they did have a problem when somebody did put a structure up and they had drainage. And I think it's important that if they're going to do that, I don't have any problem, wouldn't have any problem with them putting a garage up. My problem is, do they make sure they don't set the drainage up so that it comes down on us?
When you had the drainage problem, was the site changed significantly?
Yeah, they put a building up.
Whereas this site is proposed not to have any changes that I could see in the elevation
I'm
at all.
sorry, I didn't.
This is not proposed to change, the property in question, I don't think, is changing the elevation of any of the property there at all, so the drainage presumably would not change at all.
Yeah, so long as it doesn't come down the hill, and that's what happened with this other situation some years back, and it created a real problem for my neighbor. And finally, they resolved it. The fellow up on Collingsdale did something to resolve the problem. But if you know about it ahead of time, you can resolve it before it becomes a problem.
Very good point. Thank you. Any other questions? This witness?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I leave?
You're free to leave. Ms. Miller.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Miller. I live at 1339 Collinsdale Avenue and reside with my husband, Don Miller, who has the petition, well, I guess both of us have the petition for the new garage. I do want to start with saying I've lived on Collinsdale for 7 years. I believe my husband has owned the home for 8 years. And it's a wonderful neighborhood, very quiet. We very much enjoy living there and love the character of the street. We are looking, as life changes and 8 years have gone by, interests change and situations have changed, and we're looking for something different now and looking for a larger garage to support our current hobby and future hobby of what we'd like to do. I know there was the question of what kind of cars we would be housing there. We would have not only our daily drivers. I have a small 2-seater car. My husband has a mid-size SUV. We also have 2 collector cars, a 1995 Defender 90, as well as a 1956 replica Porsche Speedster. So those would be the 4 cars we would like to have in the home. As of right now, the way the size of the garage is, my husband cannot get his mid-size SUV in the garage to allow a passenger to get out because the door is, the wall is so close to the door. So it would help with the functionality of being able to at least put our daily drivers in the car, in the garage.
When you say that's your hobby is collecting those cars?
Collecting cars, driving cars, we enjoy cars.
And you work on them as well in the garage?
No, we do not.
Okay, so it's merely for storage of the automobiles?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that your husband has, in the current garage, has trouble opening his SUV door.
Correct.
So what I'm hearing is we're going to nearly double the floor area of the garage, and yet the problem may only be one of convenience, which is to open up the door. Is there a solution that satisfies that concern in order to, in order to make allow your husband to park his SUV, or are we really looking at doubling the floor area of the garage?
I would say it's probably a combination of both, to be able to park his car in the garage. I also think it's, he's never put it in there, maybe tried once. It's also not deep enough to keep his car in there and
Okay.
actually close the door.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it would-
And how much, what would need to be, I mean, I guess my question is, in order to satisfy that, then we have to go to the garage that you're proposing here.
To satisfy that, as well as house all 4 of the cars we own.
Okay, you can't get all 4 of the cars in right now?
No, no.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Other questions, Fred?
Yes, I do. Your hobby of collecting cars, is it likely to expand beyond the current 2?
It's hard to say. At this time, there's no plans to expand. In the future, I don't know.
Where do you park now? You said, so the SUV doesn't fit in there very easily.
No.
Your car does. What about the other cars? How do you use the current garage now?
The current garage does house the Defender 90 and the replica Speedster.
Right, okay.
So my husband and I, we park in the driveway because it's a single-car driveway that expands. But when my husband's son is at our home, he has to park on the street.
Right.
Because either
okay.
someone's blocked in or there's just not space.
Thank you.
Other questions? Brian, anything? One question, you may not be able to answer this, we might need Ms. Imbus back, but do you know if any part of this will affect the drainage as the...
I don't think I can answer that, not that I'm
Gotcha.
aware of.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your consideration.
Thanks. Would anybody else like to speak in favor of this? Yes, please. Well, come up and give us your name and address. Appreciate it.
My name is Betsy Haddad. I live at 1354 Collinsdale Avenue. I'm speaking in favor of Don and Jennifer Miller's garage. We got a notice in the mail that said that they were asking for a variation, and instantly the thought was, let's do whatever we can to try to keep them in our neighborhood. I purchased my home in 2008, and it has steadily declined in value. There have been houses that have gone for sale on my street in that time that have gone unsold and are now occupied by renters. They do not take care of their house the same way a homeowner takes care of them. The house that's directly next door to Mr. and Mrs. Miller's house is undergoing some kind of leveling and drainage tile, and it's looked like a mud hole since spring of last year. There's a house up the street that they started re-siding it. They must have run out of money. They're done re-siding it. I mean, there are so many houses on our street that are affecting the character and charm by just not doing what it is that they're supposed to do. Don and Jennifer Miller's house looks like something out of House Beautiful. The cars that they're driving are worth more than my house is worth. When I see their cars parked on the street, people fly down Collinsdale. It's a 25-mile-an-hour district. They fly 40 miles an hour down there. They throw garbage out of the window. I wish I had space in my yard for them to park their cars, because I know for a fact that Mr. Miller owns a business in Claremont County. He has the ability to probably live wherever he wants to live, and yet he chooses to stay on Collinsdale, and I think that's a plus for us. As a neighbor, I can't say enough nice things about them. They didn't know we were coming tonight. They certainly didn't ask us to come tonight, but drive down that street on any given day and take a look at their house. If anything is going to affect drainage on the street behind us, it would be maybe the guy who's dug out his entire backyard and is replacing new drainage tile and has stopped the job. I mean, Don Miller's yard looks like truly something out of a magazine. So we're just here to speak in support of the Millers and their project and the value that it brings to our street.
Thank you. Any questions?
No questions? Thank you.
Anyone else? I would like to perhaps bring Ms. Imbus back up and ask about drainage, if we might. would you mind coming back up, Ms. Imbus? and-
I'm going to defer that to my husband.
Okay, sure.
Construction end.
You can give us your
Did he swear himself?
name and address. Did you stood up and swore in?
Yes, I did.
Yes, you did.
Yes. My name is Bill Imbus. I live at 1010 Spindletop. I'll actually be doing the construction of the building. I know drainage was a concern. When the building is erected, as far as the grade, the elevation, we will not change that at all. The only concern will be the downspout lines, which will go ahead and drain towards the front. The property that we're talking about drains towards Collinsdale, so we'll be able to put the downspouts to the front of the building and make sure that it all drains towards the front and stays on the property and not goes towards the rear, towards Rambling Hills.
And is there a concern that whatever's going on next door could impact your project in terms of drainage?
No, nothing will change as far as drainage. No. We'll drain it the same way it's been drained since the building was erected in 1935 or whenever you said.
Questions of Mr. English? Thank you. Would anybody else care to speak? I think we've heard from all. Anybody opposed? With that, I'll close the public hearing.
Can I ask you another question? Maybe you can ask it of Allison, and I don't know if that'll generate any more discussion, but the staff remarks, I think when we talked about a second ago, there was a number of garages pointed out that appeared to be similar to this size, yet I don't recall hearing any other variances on this particular street. What's the situation with those other garages, as far as your understanding
There
is?
are two that predate the township having its own zoning, and they do not conform with today's regulations, so they would be considered existing non-conforming. And then there's one that has been more recently erected, however, it was done so without a zoning certificate.
Yes.
It
Now,
was done what?
Without a zoning certificate.
so that's a different question. So the staff report says that they would allow, the zoning would allow 450 square foot garage. Does that size of an accessory, what determines that? Is that just called out in the C district? Do other districts allow bigger garages
Other
because they're bigger
districts
lots?
would allow bigger, or a larger lot within the C district would allow bigger. It's based on 30% of the required rear yard. And that's calculated based on the required rear yard setback for the district, and then multiplying that by the width of the parcel.
Okay, so it's kind of tied to the lot size,
It's kind of
is
tied to
what
the
you're
lot
saying.
size and then what district it's in.
Is there been, I don't know the answer to this, but it says it's large enough to house 2 vehicles. Is that based on just standard?
Typical standard parking calculation.
You can fit 2, even
It
today's
doesn't make
modern
it too
size
friendly
vehicles?
to opening doors, as we've heard, but it'll
It
be out of the
works,
elements in 450, yeah.
Okay, all right, those were my
Does that
additional.
include a modern SUV?
Perhaps not.
Perhaps not, no.
Yeah, might be a little close.
An extension of Mr. Ellis' question, Allison, the calculation, as I read the resolution several times over, the wording is the required size of the backyard, which for District C is the same as District B2, and the size is a 30-foot backyard.
Is the setback, right, and then that would also be multiplied by the width of the parcel. So a wider parcel would mean a larger required rear yard area.
And that would be 30 times the 50 feet
Correct, and then taking
for the width.
30% of that.
And then 30% of that comes out to that 450 calculation. But the actual size lot is much larger than that. It is much deeper than 30 feet.
Yes.
We don't make any allowance for that in our zoning regulations.
No.
Okay.
Anything else before I close the public portion of the hearing? Any other questions that we want to ask of any of the applicant or any, with their contractor?
None of the public. I may have one more for the staff, but we can
Oh,
do
no,
that.
Go ahead, because maybe it'll lead to something. Go ahead.
The action on the structure that was built with, presumably without a building permit and without a zoning variance, what's the action planned on that, if any?
None unless we receive a complaint on the property, as at the trustee's direction, we are complaint-based, and then in which case it would receive a zoning violation.
Got it, okay.
All right, that being said, we're going to close the public hearing on Case 2, 2013. Board will now debate it, and our procedure is to take a straw ballot after we do some debating and to see where we stand on it. And we may or may not take the final formal action tonight. But at this point, the public hearing part's closed. You're free to sit and watch, but don't get to participate. So, with that, ask for reactions to this situation. Seems to be a difficult one.
I'll start us off, Mr. Chairman. It is a difficult one for me. I think from a usage of the neighborhood and appearances, I am in favor of granting this variance, but from a standing by our zoning regulations and making sure that we stick with them unless it is really excessive for the property owner, which is the purpose of our board. Part of our purpose is to reinforce the zoning resolution as it exists, as long as it does not cause undue hardship for the property owner. And I can't see that we can grant this within the zoning regulations, the way that they are written. So it's a very difficult one for me.
Ron?
Well, that was well stated, and I agree with you. And I heard a lot of comment, and some I always really like to hear. I was disappointed to hear that there's some observation of the neighborhood being under some stress because it is a very lovely neighborhood, and this house on 1339 is a very charming house as well. I can't imagine people flying 40 down there. When I drove by it, I was constantly pulling over for people to let them by, but I'm, again, sympathetic to that. I guess on balance, it's the problem I see is that neighborhood is fairly small lots, and the zoning anticipates that, and the zoning calls for a maximum size, and the request here is for double that. And the bottom line, I guess, is the reason for that is because of a personal hobby, and it sounds like a really fantastic hobby too, very interesting, and the investment in the neighborhood is very positive. However, the code, it does seem like just the size of it is out of scale, and I did not necessarily see that the hardship criteria were met in this case. That's where I stand now, unless I hear something other from the board members.
Steve?
I am going to echo the difficulty that I have with this request. And I look at from a planning point of view, and I was glad that Allison pulled up the standards here, because I look at number 3, and the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered. And I go back, and I don't need Allison to point up that aerial view, but you look at the rear yards and the intention to minimize the sizes of these accessory structures in order to leave as much open space as possible back there. This, I think a structure of this size, twice the size that is allowed per the zoning code, is exactly why we have these standards. Again, I echo the difficulty not only from a planning, from a standard point of view, but I think also is, and I echo Mr. Hayes here with his undue hardship. I'm trying to grapple with what is the issue of undue hardship, with the exception that they have a wonderful hobby that they enjoy. It just happens to involve automobiles that need garages. So I can't see that we can grant the variance based on the standards that we have pulled up here.
Brian?
I'd like to share all those sentiments. On initial reading, I had a kind of a feeling about the case. It's kind of changed a little bit. It's not lost on me that there's not any opposition to granting it any of the residents. But it does seem to be a significant change. So.
Well, I'll take the contrary view from you all, not surprisingly sometimes. I think a couple of things distinguish this from other situations. When we have an older neighborhood, and we have faced these situations throughout the history of this board. We have an older neighborhood, they tend to have smaller lots, but we really try to encourage investment in our properties here in Anderson Township and improvement of our properties. And I think that this kind of an upgrade, you know, frankly, to fit something that'll fit your cars, and I understand that it's you know, a tandem 4-car thing, but I think those kind of upgrades are important. And I see a distinction on this property versus others because of what's behind it. I mean, frankly, the Rambling Hills sits down below it. The fact that there is a structure that is perhaps bigger at the rear property line, I don't think has an impact on the property behind them. That's why I don't find that it's, I wouldn't find that it's varying the essential character of the neighborhood. So in my mind, those two things offset what is clearly a very close call, a very difficult call. I respect your opinion. I kind of look at it a little differently. Further discussion back and forth? I didn't persuade anybody.
Yeah, I was leaning close enough to where I'm considering what you're saying.
Thank you.
So when you talk about reinvestment in the property, how do you see that being in play with the hardship standards?
Well, I think this is a tough one. I mean, maybe it's because if we take judicial notice of the fact that I grew up, and when I was 16 years old, I drove down Collinsdale at 40 miles an hour the way everybody else did. Only back then, the cops sat there all the time, and they ticketed us on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. I do think that getting cars off of that street is important. And I think that they're able, by doing this, they're able to still keep their driveway parking and you know, with a slightly wider building, a little deeper one, handle that. I don't know if there's another way to handle that. And, you know, I guess I don't find it that unusual for a family to have more than 2 cars. theirs might be hobbies. The next owner might not have that hobby. The next owner could just happen to have 2 kids of driving age and have 4 cars. So so in that way, I do think that there's a hardship here that can only be addressed that way. But I understand it's a close call. And clearly, we have to take into account, I mean, it's neat that they've got, you know, whatever it was, a portion of the driveway and a replica in the garage, but we have to set a standard, assuming that the next owner, because this variance we grant lasts forever, and so we have to deal with the fact that it may not be the Millers living there forever, it may be somebody else who wants to use it to, you know, work on their cars, or just use it to park lawnmowers, but
Are we allowed to ask questions of staff? We are not, are we?
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Does the property conform, does the size of the property conform to the zoning code?
Yes.
Okay, so when I was on Marymount Planning Commission, we had a lot of properties that were substandard.
Right.
So they did not, the properties themselves did not conform. So when somebody was coming for like a 2-car garage, I mean, undue hardship indicated, and we would grant an accessory building that was larger than what was required because the property was substandard to the zoning code.
No, this meets
But
typical characteristics of C. The required lot width there is 50 feet.
Right. So I'm trying to understand the undue hardship case, because that could help me. That could help me go, I mean, you know, we're all saying this is a difficult case, and potentially to err on a side of not granting it makes us safe, but I'm trying to get into my head because I'm looking at the standards that we have here, and how can we grant this standard and not grant the next one? That might be a 460 square feet, or you know, for 810 square feet, or whatever. And that's why I'm just trying to get my head around something that I can anchor onto that would say that the variance ought to be granted.
Let me try this, Mr. Haber.
Thank you.
The zoning resolution minimum required backyard is 30 feet. By the width of the property is 50. The actual lot, rear yard, I need your help on this, Allison, but from my estimation, it was closer to...
85.
Yeah, 80, 85. If I calculated it based upon, and the intent of the resolution is to provide a substantial open area and green space and open space to the sky.
Yes.
If I took a look at the actual rear yard, as measured, really, even the 800 square feet is less than the 30% of that actual property.
Yes.
I did work through that calculation before this meeting, but the zoning resolution uses the words required rear yard rather than actual, and that's why I asked the question. But does that help you, Mr. Haber, as far as if we look at the intent behind it? This property not only meets the current zoning rules, it exceeds it. The lot is far deeper than the requirements for District C. And you would agree with that, right, Allison? Yep. Okay. Does that help?
To the extent,
enough.
well, to the extent that they would be able to, would they not be able to enlarge in the house and completely fill in
Correct,
the buildable area?
correct, up to
So-
that 30-foot setback.
So they could come along next year and build their house to within 30 feet of the rear yard and be in compliance with zoning?
Correct.
Are we free to condition it on not having more, I don't know what the correct term would be, covered square feet or whatever?
If the intent of the code is to allow open space,
Correct.
then understanding that this body could take a look at what the actual rear yard is what Fred was talking about, and calculate that, and say no further encroachment into the rear yard more than what it is right now, then that's a standard that I think we could say, establish a precedent that we could use.
Yeah.
But if you look at the aerial photo or the auditors or the plat, aren't they all like that? Aren't they all deep like that?
Yeah, most of the lots in this area are about the same depth.
So we're really kind of just, you know,
Yeah, you are, I mean, we are setting somewhat of a precedent, although some of these lots in this area sit above, so there's people behind it aren't impacted.
yeah, that was your distinguishing factor, but this difference we're talking about doesn't distinguish it really from any of the other ones, I guess is my point.
No, and I think Mr. Haber's point was that all of the properties all along the street could come in with the same request, but using this criteria would probably be satisfactory. Would not harm the neighborhood, I think is what you were saying.
Right, right,
I mean, yeah, from a planning purpose, it's open space percentage.
right. Right, then what we're saying is we're preserving the open space and allowing construction to 30% of that, then the open space that allows that 30% needs to be preserved.
Brian, what are your thoughts? You still where you were before on this?
Well, it's
Either Brian.
It-
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah,
Mr.
sorry.
Mr. Johnson.
You go ahead, Mr. Johnson, I'll let you go.
I gotta quit calling Brian.
Where I am right now is I think it's close enough to grant a variance. It's close enough where I'd like for the property owners to be able to do with the property as they wish. That street does have quite a few cars. I go down it fairly often. We have a babysitter down on Collins Park, I think. So I do travel that street, and it is fairly congested.
It was a little scary just trying to stop in front of the house to take a look at the garage in the back.
Well, then I'll add Brian's comments to that, which is, looking at it as a percentage is somewhat persuasive to me, but I wonder how comfortable the board would be if somebody, the next person came in, granted, this isn't the case here, it was pointed out by Mr. Johnson, there was no opposition, and that's not really a factor. But what if somebody, the next one says, hey, I heard your last case, I've got the same mathematics to it, same placement. But then those neighbors said, well, you know, I think that's too large relative to my lot, and it overshadows my lot, and this time, it changes the nature of the bungalow character of the neighborhood. I don't know, I guess I'd be challenged on that one then to say, okay, well, how do we say no now this time? So it's,
Very good, very good point, Brian. Well, I guess anything else to bring to for consideration here?
no.
Would we all, if this were to be granted, I'm not saying it will be, but if it were to be granted, are we comfortable that we can have some language about drainage to address?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we could also, yeah, I've got some draft words here of no further extension of either the house or the adjacent structure into the rear yard. So, or some other words that would have similar effect. I think we could word that too.
If the intention of the code is to keep a certain percentage open space, and we can maintain that given this variance, then, you know, and then the issue of the drainage, I think, is very important. I can saddle along with that if we can come up with some language that preserves the open space, which I think is the intention of the code.
Let me ask, that's a good point. Let me ask a question, Allison. If the applicant were to come in here and instead of doing a new garage, was just doing an extension on the rear of their house, putting 2 bedrooms and a study or something like that on, taking it all the way back to 30 feet, would they be able to do that as a matter of right?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And then I would think having granted a garage of this size without some other language would be inappropriate. Because then all of a sudden, there's little open space in the backyard. And what is good is that we've got that continuity from property to property to property to property.
I'm looking for the wording, Allison, if you can help me, in the zoning resolution that really points to the intention of the rear yard being open to the sky. And I know I've read it in here.
In
I just don't have a
171,
lawyer. What is it?
171.7, and then 171.9 discusses every part of a required yard shall be open to the sky unobstructed.
That's it. Allison, could you bring that up so that we could all see that? It's page 110.
I'm enjoying your picture up there on the screen for a second already.
I will go ahead and point out that Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District would actually look at any earthwork permits or any changes to existing elevation, rather than the township doing so.
So we would not supervise the construction that may alter drainage?
Correct.
It's
They would
the-
look at drainage.
Okay.
So, but we're free to put a condition in that they won't, that the
You can
drainage-
add a condition that they'll contact Hamilton County Soil and Water.
And confirm that the drainage back, okay. All right, other questions or comments? I thank the board for a very, I mean, it's a really close call. And thank the board for its consideration of all the issues that we're dealing in front of us. Having said that,
The one piece along that line that I was cautiously thinking about here is that most of the time, we reinforce the staff's opinion on these variances. And on this one, if we were to grant it, it would be one of the rare ones where we are going against staff's recommendation. And we shouldn't do that without due caution.
good point. Having said all that, willing to entertain a motion one way or the other to call this question.
You want to do it?
I'll be glad to.
Go ahead.
Okay. In regards to case number 2-2013 BZA at 1339 Collinsdale Avenue, I move we grant the variance for a garage of size 20 feet by 40 feet to be constructed and located in accordance with the drawings dated February 15th, 2013. And that motion is based on the following conditions: that the rear of the house does not extend further rearward into the rear yard than what currently exists. Now, my second condition, and I may need some help here in wording this, is regarding the drainage, that the drainage be focused onto the front of the property, and there was some mention of who was going to be contacted.
Hamilton County Soil and Water.
Hamilton County Soil and
Hamilton County Soil and Water, they will be contacted as a part of this construction process. That construction be commenced within a year and completed within 2 years. And that is based on that granting the variance will, that preserving the area in the rear yard will mean that the essential character of the neighborhood will not be substantially altered. Variance does not adversely affect delivery of governmental services. The property owner's predicament cannot be obviated through some other method other than granting this variance. And I think especially number 7, the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement of ensuring open space in the rear yard will be observed and substantial justice done by granting the variance along with its conditions.
All right, as a straw vote, we have a
We need a
motion.
second.
Huh?
We need a second.
Yeah, I was going to ask for a
Okay.
second. We have a motion of
Second.
Mrs. Strawberry, we have a second. Further discussion?
I would like to add some stronger specific words about our estimation of the substance of the variance and the way that we are interpreting the maximum space in the rear yard. So with that, if you would permit me to amend that to say that the variance is not substantial since the actual rear yard is much larger than that required by the zoning resolution. And the actual percentage usage by the adjacent structure would be below the 30% requirement.
I like the language. Thanks, Fred.
I would like to suggest or request one other addition in our reasoning to be specific of the fact that due to the topography, the property to the rear, the closest property, one of the closest properties to the garage is not, its view is not impacted at all by the structure. We could work that into one of our reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't have any comments on the motion. Very well done, I'd say. I'm still going to be a reluctant no on this, and I'd just add that I do think that it is out of scale for the neighborhood and what's existing there. I did not really hear a true hardship presented or characterized by a problem with the lot. I think it's a personal preference. I think we've somewhat kind of rewritten the standard here. The standard talks about the size of the accessory structure. It doesn't go into these further considerations, although maybe that's the province of the board to do that. And I do have some concern that this is a very friendly terms type of hearing tonight, but I could see potentially there being some precedent issues with that, but I commend you guys on forming a very well-formed motion that captures your sense in allowing this to go forward.
Any further discussion?
Well, I would agree that in effect we are taking our, the provisions of the code and what am I trying to say here? Because of what could be construed as undue hardship, which trying to make this work in a way that, in my mind, preserves what I believe to be the intent of the code. It doesn't necessarily say it that way. But this is a way that I think we can grant it, that that if we are granting a variance beyond it, something that I think we can hang our hat on, should we get another one of these our way.
And the other thing that does kind of sway it for me is if the Millers had no taste or concern for how something looked, they could tack this four-car garage onto the rear of their house, attach it to their house, and as long as it's not 30 feet off the back property line, they could do that as a matter of right and have the same intensity of use as we're going to permit. Thankfully, they've got a little more taste than that, it sounds like. But
And not cite it or leave the...
yeah, they want to be able to look out of their kitchen window and see something other than a wall, but that was my comment. Mr. Johnson, any further thoughts?
I think that's exactly right. I don't want to set a precedent that's going to bind us later, but I think if they would attach to the house, it would be no different. So.
Well, one thing about it is the building does look like it's going to be very nicely done, and so that does fit in, does have an aspect of fitting into the character as opposed to some type of pole barn structure, so they're obviously making a significant investment, as I said before. That's very
Tough call.
positive.
Tough call.
Yes.
Having said all that, we have a motion and a second. Debbie, could you call the roll? This once again is a straw ballot, but
Brian Ellis,
No?
Brett Hyde,
Aye.
Steve Haber,
Aye.
Brian Johnson,
Aye.
Rick Oberschmidt.
aye. All right, do you want to write this up tonight, then?
No, I'd rather have Gary take a look at it and then go ahead and do the formal.
Okay, so what that means for you all is a little bit of a delay, because the staff will need to write this resolution up, and you want to review it with
With legal counsel?
legal counsel, who reviews these for us, which means we take a final action on it at next month's meeting. Might delay you a little bit, but once again, this is a straw vote. Doesn't get binding until there's a formal action on it next month. We will not reopen a public hearing for next month, it will just be looking at a final resolution, debating that final resolution,
Right,
and acting on it.
right.
All right, that's all we have on the agenda. It looks like we do have a draft of some bylaws for us to look at.
Yeah, I left those for you to go ahead and take home, look over, and then email me any comments that you have.
All right. We'll do
And we
that.
can act on these at our next meeting?
Yes.
So we have the month to review them?
Yep.
If we see any further changes, should we get to you ahead of time, or should we
Go
work
ahead
that
and
at our
get to me
next
ahead of
meeting?
time, just so that I can run it by Gary as well as Paul.
Okay.
All right. We need a motion to adjourn. I haven't read that part of the bylaws yet.
So moved.
Second.
Meeting's adjourned.